The morning sunlight barely peeked through the thick trees when Daniel stepped onto his lawn and froze. His eyes widened in disbelief. A backhoe was tearing apart his property, splintering the old fence he had built with his own hands. Each crack and snap echoed like a betrayal. Small shards of wood scattered into the air, landing in the soft dew of the morning grass. The stream behind the property shimmered peacefully, completely oblivious to the chaos unfolding just a few feet away. Daniel's heart raced, his chest tightening with a mix of fear and fury. How could this happen without warning? Every memory tied to that fence, laughter, summer evenings, and quiet reflection, was being shredded before his eyes. And yet, in that instant, a spark of determination ignited. He would not let them take this without a fight. Daniel grabbed the old deed from his pocket, fingers trembling slightly as he unfolded it. The paper felt fragile under his fingertips, the ink slightly faded but still legible. He scanned every line, every stamp, every signature, searching for confirmation that he still had rights over his own land. Shadows stretched across his face, highlighting the tension in his jaw and the worry etched into his eyes. For a moment he felt the crushing weight of helplessness, the disbelief that bureaucracy could so easily trample years of care, effort, and love. But beneath that, a quiet, steely resolve began to form. He would gather evidence. He would fight. And he would reclaim what was rightfully his, no matter the obstacles. Just a week earlier, life had been simpler. Daniel and Marissa sat in their cozy backyard, morning coffee warming their hands, sunlight streaming softly through the oak trees. The garden bloomed with the careful touch of years of attention. Roses, tulips, and freshly tilled soil. Birds chirped in harmony, and the small fountain trickled gently. Marissa smiled across the table, sipping her coffee, unaware of the storm looming on their horizon. Daniel's eyes drifted toward the property line, a subtle tension knitting his brows. Something had shifted, a nagging sense that the calm, idyllic neighborhood they had loved for a decade was quietly changing, inch by inch. And though the morning was peaceful, he couldn't shake the feeling that their sanctuary was no longer untouchable. A flyer had arrived in the mailbox days before, announcing a new HOA board meeting. The words were innocuous at first glance, printed on crisp white paper, but the tone was subtly commanding. Bold letters emphasized compliance, deadlines, and community standards. Shadows in the blurred suburban background hinted at eyes watching, monitoring, waiting for mistakes. Daniel felt a cold pang in his stomach. The neighborhood had always been orderly, yes, but friendly enforcement was supposed to be guidance, not intimidation. The flyer, seemingly innocent, now felt like a warning, a harbinger of the conflict that was quietly approaching, one that would soon shake their lives to the core. Walking down the neighborhood street, Daniel noticed details he had ignored before. The subtle, yet imposing HOA signs, the perfectly aligned mailboxes, the manicured lawns that now felt almost militarized in their perfection. Everything seemed calm on the surface, but the quiet authority of the HOA loomed over every home. Kids rode bikes, neighbors chatted over fences, but there was an undercurrent of tension that prickled Daniel's awareness. The community he thought he knew, where safety and friendship had reigned, was revealing a more controlling, calculated side. And he sensed, deep in his gut, that his sanctuary, his family's home, would soon be caught in the crossfire. The mid-morning sun glared down on Daniel as he stormed toward the HOA crew, Camden at the front, clipboard in hand, barking orders with practiced precision. Splinters and nails littered the grass, the backhoe groaning as it pried the fence apart. Daniel's hands were clenched into fists, his knuckles white, every muscle coiled with tension. "This is my property," he shouted, voice cracking with both anger and fear. Camden barely looked up, flipping a page on his clipboard, his expression cold, detached. The crew moved mechanically, ignoring Daniel's protests. Each swing of the hammer, each scraping of metal against wood, felt like a personal attack, stripping away not just his fence, but years of memories. The laughter of children, the late-night conversations with Marissa, the quiet evenings he had spent watching the sun set over the pond. Daniel felt a mix of rage and helplessness, but a flicker of determination burned brighter. He would document every violation, every overreach, and he would not back down. Later that week, Daniel found himself hunched over the worn wooden desk of the county records office, fluorescent lights flickering overhead. Stacks of maps, deeds, and plat plans surrounded him like towers of paper. His eyes scanned the lines, annotations, and official stamps, searching for proof, the legal shield he desperately needed. Sweat dotted his brow as he cross-referenced signatures, dates, and notes, tracing every boundary line with a pencil. Every page turned revealed the meticulous planning that had gone into his property, and yet frustration boiled inside him. The bureaucracy was labyrinthine, officials indifferent, and the weight of evidence he needed seemed always just out of reach. Still, with each discovery, a quiet satisfaction surged. He was not powerless. Knowledge, he realized, could be his weapon, the only way to fight back against a system that seemed rigged against him. Outside, under a cloudless blue sky, Daniel met with Eddie, a trusted friend and local surveyor. They moved systematically along the property line, stakes in hand, maps unfurled on the grass, overlay sheets weighted down with stones. Every corner was measured, every boundary triple-checked, the sound of hammers and rustling paper filling the quiet morning. The stakes felt like markers of resistance, tiny flags signaling that Daniel would not yield without a fight. Eddie's furrowed brow mirrored Daniel's own determination, a silent acknowledgement of the injustice they faced. The air was thick with anticipation and unspoken anger. Every measurement, every note scribbled in the margins, was a step closer to reclaiming what was his. And yet, an unsettling thought lingered. Would this meticulous effort even matter when the HOA seemed determined to ignore facts, rules, or fairness? Days later, from the edge of his property, Daniel raised a pair of binoculars. His gaze followed the construction that now invaded his land, metal and concrete rising where his peaceful yard once lay. The chain-link fence in the foreground framed the intrusion like a visual reminder of powerlessness. Dust hung in the air, and the hum of machinery drowned out the birdsong he had once cherished. Each structure erected without his consent, each footprint of concrete, felt like a violation, a message that his home was no longer sacred. Anger mixed with despair, but beneath it, determination crystallized. He would not let his life, his memories, or his property be erased silently. Every photograph he snapped, every note he scribbled became ammunition in a battle that was no longer just about fences. It was about respect, ownership, and dignity. That evening, a letter arrived, slipping under the door like a shadow of intimidation. Daniel picked it up, feeling the weight of the crisp paper, the formal font screaming authority. Sitting at the kitchen table, warm lamplight casting shadows across the room, he unfolded it slowly. The words hit him like a physical blow. Fines, deadlines, threats of legal action, all for standing firm on what was rightfully his. Marissa watched quietly, her hand brushing his for comfort, sharing the silent rage and disbelief. Anger coiled within him, but so did clarity. Every intimidation tactic only steeled his resolve. The battle lines were drawn, and Daniel knew that to protect his home, his family, and his sanity, he would need to become meticulous, strategic, and relentless. There was no turning back. The courtroom buzzed with quiet tension, the air thick with anticipation and the faint scent of polished wood. Daniel stood before the judge, upright and unwavering, a stack of maps and overlays arranged meticulously on an easel. Each sheet told a story. Years of ownership, careful planning, and the subtle injustices inflicted by the HOA. Camden and the other board members sat stiffly, their expressions a mix of annoyance and unease, aware for the first time that Daniel had come prepared. Daniel's voice was calm but firm as he explained boundary lines, official approvals, and documented missteps, pointing to exact coordinates and signatures. Every eye in the room followed his hand gestures. Every whispered gasp from the gallery punctuated the tension. The judge leaned forward, attentive, absorbing each piece of evidence, the weight of authority slowly shifting from intimidation to fairness. Daniel's heart raced, but a controlled focus ran through his every motion. This was the pinnacle of the fight, the moment where years of stress and injustice would either crumble under the weight of truth or be buried by bureaucracy once more. Then, in a moment that seemed suspended in time, Linda Harper, a key HOA member known for her sharp tongue and unyielding stance, suddenly swayed in her chair and fainted. Gasps erupted from the audience as eyes darted between her collapsed form and the tense expressions of the board. Camden froze, shock evident in every line of his face, his clipboard slipping from his hands. The judge called for a brief recess, assistants rushing to aid Linda, but the courtroom's energy had irrevocably shifted. Daniel, standing composed, felt a mix of vindication and disbelief. Every insult, every threat, every violation by the HOA had led to this climactic moment. And now, the balance of power had subtly but unmistakably begun to tip. The tension that had gripped him for weeks, months, even years, now felt tangible, almost physical, like a storm ready to break, and he knew the final outcome rested only on what the judge would decide next. Hours later, stepping out of the courthouse into the crisp afternoon light, Daniel and Marcus were met with a throng of cameras, reporters, and curious neighbors. The flash of cameras reflected off their faces, capturing the culmination of weeks of struggle, sleepless nights, and dogged determination. The crowd buzzed with questions, murmurs of disbelief and support intertwining. Daniel's jaw tightened, but his posture was relaxed, victorious yet humble, as he addressed the reporters briefly, highlighting the importance of standing up against abuse and bureaucracy. Marcus clapped a reassuring hand on his shoulder, both of them feeling the weight of the battle they had endured and the beginning of a new chapter. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, the fight for fairness seemed to have been won, yet the echoes of the conflict lingered in every glance, every camera flash, a testament to the ordeal that had transformed their lives. The early morning sun spilled golden light across Evergreen Plaza as Daniel moved methodically from one business to another, posting eviction notices with careful precision. Each notice carried the weight of the law, backed by the resolution of the court, a symbolic reclaiming of justice. Business owners looked on in disbelief, flipping the paper over, reading the fine print, the shock and realization clear in their eyes. Marcus followed silently, handing Daniel fresh copies as the breeze rustled through the small plaza. The tension of weeks melted into a quiet, intense satisfaction. Daniel wasn't just vindicated. He had restored the rules of fairness to a community that had been twisted by the HOA's overreach. Even as the owners whispered among themselves and called their offices, the moment felt cinematic, as if time had slowed to highlight each expression. Each reaction, a vivid testimony to the cost and the reward of standing firm. Back at home, the tranquility of Daniel's property offered a stark contrast to the courtroom chaos. He worked with careful, deliberate strokes, staining the oak fence and rebuilding the small bench overlooking the stream that had once been threatened. Each plank placed and smoothed was a tangible symbol of reclaiming control, a return to normalcy. Marissa brought him iced tea, her smile warm but tinged with relief, watching as the sunlight glinted off freshly oiled wood. The gentle murmur of the stream and the rustling of leaves created a serene backdrop, reinforcing the idea that life could heal. Daniel paused occasionally, running a hand over the smooth timber, breathing in the crisp air, feeling the satisfaction of labor completed and justice served. A quiet victory, but one steeped in years of struggle and perseverance. In the golden hour glow, the neighborhood came alive with laughter, chatter, and the smell of freshly grilled food. Families gathered for a community potluck, the very heart of what Daniel and Marissa had loved about their home. Kids dashed across the asphalt, their joyful screams echoing off the houses, while neighbors shared stories, jokes, and congratulations. Faces that had once been tense or guarded now reflected warmth, connection, and cautious relief. Daniel moved through the crowd, shaking hands, hugging friends, exchanging knowing looks, the subtle acknowledgement of the long battle they had witnessed. The HOA's heavy hand no longer dominated the energy of the street. Instead, a renewed sense of togetherness and respect had blossomed. Every smile, every shared plate, every playful shout from the children reinforced the notion that resilience and fairness could triumph over arbitrary power. As dusk settled, Daniel sat on the newly built bench, the stream quietly flowing at his feet, filtering the last rays of sunlight through the trees. His expression was calm, reflective, yet victorious, a man who had endured the storm and emerged stronger. The distant laughter of children and the gentle murmur of neighbors carrying on with their evening provided a subtle symphony, celebrating life, justice, and community. Marissa sat beside him, her hand brushing his shoulder lightly, a silent acknowledgment of everything they had overcome together. In this moment, Daniel felt the full weight of their journey, the confrontation, the fear, the triumph, and ultimately, the restoration of balance. The camera would linger on his face, capturing the quiet pride and relief that comes from knowing that persistence, courage, and unwavering principles had reshaped not just his home, but the entire neighborhood for the better.